with that, let me transition to my presentation. We'll go from exciting to thank you all for being here. We decided to set this room up in a little bit of an informal kind of a setting for this first go at it. Wanted to just give an overview of what to expect over the next few days. This, as George said, is a really important part of the work that we do, both in the maintenance committee and as the technical services program. Every other year we do this national conference, at least that's the plan. And there's a lot of stuff that happens at this national conference. Out of it hopefully comes research ideas and prioritizing that research and all that, and we really follow that then to help promote some of those ideas up the chain and get funding for that research. So as a meeting overview, Tuesday today, it's really dedicated to our regional business meetings. Other than this little kickoff session here, those regional meetings, we have 4 regions in the nation. And those meetings, we elect our officers. We're going to review the member contact information. So on our website, that emtsp.org that George mentioned, we show all the contacts for all the states, who's responsible for the equipment fleet, what's a good phone number, what's an email. And obviously, you know, in your organization, I'm sure there's all kinds of turnover. Same with every organization. And so that list needs constant updating. We're going to ask you all, when you break into your regions, to kind of review that contact information and update that, make sure that it's accurate. And then hopefully you'll have time to think about future conferences. So as a region, you guys all meet, we all meet in the odd number years. So next year, your region will be meeting somewhere within your region. For me in the Midwest, we partner up with the Northeast and we rotate and we meet as 2 regions together. The next go around, I think it's the Northeast turn next year, so we'll have that conversation and talk about, hopefully the Northeast will talk about, you know, who would like to host. As the national conference, that happens in the even numbered years, and we've gotten out of rotation. Obviously last year was a bust for everybody. We had planned on meeting in San Diego, and COVID had another idea, and so that did not happen. As a general rule, we try and do a rotation from region to region. Florida was gracious enough to stand up and say that they wanted to host this, and with that we really appreciate. And so the next time we meet will be in 2024, and it will be the West's turn to host if they can find somebody that's willing to do it. Obviously, it takes kind of a special venue if we're going to bring a lot of equipment in, and so that sort of limits where and who can host and those sorts of things. But if the West is willing and has somebody that will stand up, we would give them the first opportunity. If they can't find a host, then we'll open it up to the nation as a whole. But the rotation is in 24 West, in 26 the Midwest turn, in 28 the Northeast, and in 30 Southeast. So if somebody within those regions will stand up and host it, that's the rotation. Otherwise, it'll kind of just open up to the floor, you know, to the whole nation, and we'll give somebody else an opportunity. One of the big things we're going to ask, and part of this conversation is really to you regional chairs, what to do when we break up. We're hoping to discuss and promote topics for voting. We need to have conversations about research topics. So we've got, years ago we developed a research roadmap where we had put together a whole long list of potential research topics that we thought were important in the equipment community. We've checked off a lot of those, and it's time to refresh that roadmap. We're going to hopefully have a research project to do that, to refresh that list of topics. We're not quite there yet. We still have a few things that if we wanted to, we could send up for research proposals and hopefully get funding for that. But honestly, the best research ideas come from you all. And so if you have some ideas on what would make a good research topic, talk about it in your regions. Each region can potentially promote up to 2 research topics. We will then throw that into the list, and by the end of today, I hope, we'll take a vote. Each state will have a vote on what they think is the highest priority on that list. We'll ask you to rank them, and just based on that vote, that'll be the thing that we promote. The way that works is we put together a research needs statement and take that to the maintenance committee that George talked about, the thing that's going to happen in Washington, D.C. in July. We'll ask the entire maintenance community to rank, not necessarily rank, but give us an idea of how important they feel like that research is. If enough states think that that's an important research idea, then it'll get funded. It goes through quite a few hoops to get to that point, but what really has made a difference, in my opinion, is be able to go before all the maintenance engineers that are represented in Washington, D.C. next July, to go before them and say, hey, all of your equipment managers were in a conference back in June in Florida, and this is the topic that they rated as the highest priority need. And that makes a difference to them. It's not just one guy up there saying, we think this is important, it's the community. And so that's why we want to spend some time thinking about that research and then voting and prioritizing that. Also, whether you're familiar or not, we've been developing web-based training. We've got at the TC3 website a long list, I think 5 or 6, almost 6 now. It's almost ready to go. Web-based training topics. They take several hours to go through. They're pretty comprehensive. They are there to really promote equipment management as a profession, to help train up folks. So it's folks that have had some experience in equipment management. They may not be at your level yet as the fleet manager, but it's a good way to get folks on board, get them trained up. We're looking for new topics, and so we've kind of got the basics covered, I think, and now we're looking to get into some more advanced topics on web-based training. If you've got some ideas on what would make a good topic, talk about it in your regions and present that to the group for us to kind of rank and prioritize later in the day. And then there's also some discussion that, we've got 5 of these national performance measures. The Michigan DOT folks have done a great job in administering that program for us. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Are those 5 topics enough? Do we need more? I'll hit that slide here in a little bit. And so then we'll have some round table discussions and voting. That's today. Tomorrow and Thursday is really about presentations and then the vendor exhibits. And so we're going to have specific time dedicated to vendor exhibits. And in that period, I'd hope that you all would go out and be very intentional about introducing yourself to those vendors. I'm going to try and hit every one of them. There's a lot of them out there, and we have limited time. And so you have to keep moving, and you have to explain that I can't stand here all day talking to you, letting you try and sell me on something, but keep moving. But they're the folks that really allow us to make this happen. When it's time to see vendors, be very intentional about getting out there and talking to them. On Thursday then, the vendors, I think after lunch, are going to be dismissed. They're going to be able to break down, and it's going to be back to just us DOT folks. And then on Friday, there are going to be more presentations. I'm going to show you the vendor results. We'll do a wrap-up, and hopefully we'll be out of here by noon. So that's sort of an overview. Wanted to kind of start the process of having you all think about these topics of research and the web-based topics and the performance measures. And so I just wanted to go through kind of what we've checked off of the list so far. We've really been successful in getting research accomplished, funded, and completed. The first one, at least that I was involved with, was NCHRP 13-04, which is the guide for the development of highway operations equipment replacement criteria. That was the die management group. That is really, it's a long title, but it's all about figuring out what are appropriate replacement cycles for your equipment. That's something we all struggle with. Does it make sense to shorten them? You know, there's all kinds of pressure to keep equipment forever, you know, because it doesn't cost you money right up front if you just hang on to that truck for 25 years. Certainly it costs you money in the long run and way more, but trying to figure out where that sweet spot is. Die Management put together a tool that we'll hear more about later, but it's in a project report 879. If you want to look that up, there is a tool that goes along with that. 1305, guidelines for the development of highway operations equipment utilization measurement. Washington State did. It was completed in 2020. And again, that's a tool and a report out there, 957. So about figuring out what is proper utilization. And again, these are all topics that us as a community voted on and said these are important for us to have an understanding of. A lot of money has been dedicated to these research projects. It's something worth checking out if you haven't seen them. 1306A, development of a tool to assist in the formulation and maintenance of long-range equipment replacement plans. And so, the pavement community, they're able to look forward 20 and 25 years and know how they're going to have to spend their money, where they're going to have to dedicate their resources on a bridge, that this thing, is going to last 50 years or whatever. Where do we need to start programming that? We're not as great at that in the equipment community. And so this is all about looking forward 20 to 25 years, knowing where these spikes are in replacement. Every once in a while we get handed a whole wad of money to spend and we dedicate it all on replacing our dump trucks or something, and then you've got that same spike coming up in 15 years or 20 years, and it's about being able to manage some of those spikes and valleys. This is a tool to help you do that. Guidelines for the calculated total cost of ownership for fleet operations is another topic that got completed here recently. Completed in 2019 by the Cadmus Group. Again, a report out there, 944. Henry's aware of this one. Guidelines for the selection and application of vehicle and equipment warning light configurations, colors, and markings. This particular project didn't come off of that research roadmap that I talked about. It is one that you all brought to us and said, this is something we need. And there's a lot of anticipation waiting for this research. It's a little behind schedule. You can thank COVID, I think, for the majority of that, since it's a lot of human studies. Does this look brighter or does this look brighter? Is this more effective? Or, you can't really do that by Zoom. And so they're a bit behind on that. The Texas A&M, the Transportation Institute is doing that. Doug Burke is on that research along with maybe a few others that are in the room. 1308, guidelines for decision making for repair versus replacement of highway maintenance equipment. Again, the Cadmus Group is doing that, and it's near completion now. July of 2022 was the estimated completion date, and I think they're just sort of putting the bow on that research. Guide to maximizing your vehicle equipment surplus values. 1309, the Kircher Group is doing that. It's ongoing, and we're expecting a completion in 23. That's about, what is the best process to use in getting rid of your surplus? Do you spend money on equipment before you surplus it, or do you set it out like it is? What are some of those best practices? How do you maximize those values? And so that's research that we got approved, and it's going on now. This NCHRP 20-7 is the thing that I talked about. That was the original research roadmap project where they came up with the long list of potential research. We asked for an update to that, which is that task 309. It was approved, and again, COVID got in the way of that. That was really meant to be an in-person panel that brainstormed topics, and because we couldn't do that in person, that money lapsed, and we have to go back to the table and ask for that again, which we plan on doing this year. Validating and communicating the long-term effects of aging government fleet assets. This is a research topic that was voted on in 2018 and prioritized high, and we've taken it to the maintenance community at every opportunity since, and it's been ranked relatively high, but for some reason it has not gotten approval for funding. I think part of that is it's difficult to conceptualize it as a research project. What we were asking for is a tool to help us communicate to our superiors, to our folks on the health of your fleet, communicating, if I delay the replacement of these, what is it really going to cost me? We have a lot of tools to kind of help us determine that cost. We don't have a lot of tools to help us communicate that cost. And we don't know what the most recent result is. We took that to the MAC community back in 21, and we're still waiting for the results back on that. So the reason I bring all this research up right now is just so you know kind of what we have out there. We don't want to submit research that we already have completed if you're not aware of it, just to make you aware of the stuff of the stuff that we've already taken and gotten funding for. So potential research topics that you might want to talk about. Like I said, you can submit up to 2 topics as a region. However you guys come up with that, that's great. We'll add it to the existing list, and each state will be asked to prioritize. And so the mechanism will be each state will have a ballot. If you have multiple representatives here from your state, you guys get together and put your results down on one ballot. But how you come up with that list as a region is really up to you. This research roadmap that we talked about with all the potential topics, these are really the topics that are remaining. Hopefully you can see that. This is the ballot that we used back in 2018. So the equipment chargeback system, that's like the revolving fund sort of mechanism for funding your equipment. Some states have that, and some states like Kansas don't. The states that are using kind of that revolving fund or that chargeback to maintenance are likely having a better success at funding their equipment than those of us that don't. And so that has been on the list of potential research. Equipment replacement financing is sort of under the same vein. Identifying existing and needed technologies on equipment, trucks, and vehicles. Long-term effects of aging the fleet on operational availability and cost. You saw that we presented that one. That was ranked at the top of the list back in 2018, and so we've been submitting that. Research to increase buying power, purchasing methods, and delivery date accountability was ranked the second one, and so those, with the exception of that top one, all of those are still on the list as potential research topics. If you guys want to prioritize those along with anything else that you can come up with as a region, we'll throw it in the list and we'll have the national voting then. I'm really relying on you regional chairs to kind of keep this list in mind. We'll try and get you something in writing, but we're not great at printing stuff up here, and the timing's not working great. So you all be thinking about what makes sense to you as research topics, and so be ready to, that you will see them on a ballot, be ready to vote on them then as a state. Web-based training. Again, you heard me talk about the web-based training that we have. We've got the 6 courses that we've identified, preventative maintenance concepts. Some of these have longer titles, but basically this is what they are. Preventative maintenance concepts is the very first one that was done. Benchmarking and best practices, equipment specification concepts and tools, core complements and optimal sizing. So what should each work group have as a core complement, and what is the right size of your fleet? How do you figure that out? Utilization management, again, it's all about training equipment managers on how to determine what is good utilization. How do you manage that utilization? Course number 6, which is the one that's getting ready to come online here, hopefully in the next month or so, procurement and disposal. So the concepts behind how you purchase, how you get rid of, what are the good, what are things to keep in mind in managing that process. We've identified courses number 7 and 8 as we get into a little more technical, developing and presenting performance measures. So what are good performance measures for you to measure your fleet by, and how do you present those? And then the quality assurance inspection best practices. How do you make sure that you've got a good inspection practices in place? So after that, we haven't identified web-based training beyond number 8 here. We've got folks ready to put together those courses. Hopefully we can get funding for those courses. A lot of times that funding comes through your regions. Be talking about that as potential for us to put on a list and rank what we should be doing next for web-based training. 2 topics, we'll add them to the existing list. You guys will prioritize. What are some topics? Maybe this chargeback system, the revolving fund, maybe that's a good web-based training topic. I'm just putting these ideas out there, not as something that I'm promoting, but things that have come to mind. Maybe determining and communicating the health of your fleet, figuring out how to determine whether you're doing a good job or not, and how do you communicate that. You know, those are things that we had on that research list that maybe would be better served as a web-based training topic. So, and now transitioning to that third list of stuff, and that is performance measures. We've had the same 5 performance measures. For those of you that aren't aware of it, Michigan DOT has helped us administer this program. Early on, EMTSP, we figured out that we really needed to have some national standards for determining what makes a good fleet. How do you determine whether you've got a good fleet or not? And so initially we had 4 performance measures that we developed or that we identified and had Michigan DOT help us develop them. PM compliance, how well are you doing with your oil changes and your PM services? Replacement recommended, in other words, are you staying on track with your replacement criteria, or are you well outside of that? Do you have good utilization is a third one, and the fourth one at the time was availability or downtime. It's the opposite of downtime. How available is your equipment? And then several years ago, we added a 5th, scheduled versus unscheduled repairs. So a measurement of whether you're doing a lot of unscheduled stuff. Do you have a lot of breakdowns, or are you staying on top of those through a good PM program? So we've got those 5 standards that we've identified and had endorsed by the maintenance committee as national performance measures. We've asked each state to report how they're doing on these 5 into Michigan, and then we are posting those results on that emtsp.org website. And if you go there, you'll see how some of the states are ranking on those. The way we do that is, and I think Andy or their group will explain this later in the week a little better than I can, but those measures are really, you measure them against yourself. If you say, our standard is that 80% of our fleet is meeting its PM compliance, or maybe it's 90% of our fleet, we're on time with all of our oil changes, then you're meeting your standard and you get a green light then. If you fall below your own standard, then it gets into the yellow, into the red based on those thresholds. So you're really reporting against yourself. You're not necessarily reporting against other states, but when you go to the website, you see how each state is doing based on their own standards, and you can see who's got a good program and who maybe doesn't. And you can visit with those folks that are doing well and find out what they're doing well. So the idea is 5 standards enough? Is that where we want to be, or do we want to add more? We really want to help kick this program into overdrive. Kansas has not been good at reporting those standards into the national website. We really struggle because we have an old homegrown equipment management system that does not lend itself well to some of these measures. We're in the process of bringing AssetWorks on board, and I think we'll have a lot better luck after we go live with it. But if you're a state that has these measures in place or could easily get to them, we'd really ask that you report those in, because us as a community can learn from you all as you do things. And you can learn from us as well. And so it's something that we think is important. It meets our goal as a technical services program to help promote good practices within the nation. So be talking about what you think might be a decent performance measure. Again, you can submit up to 2 if you think that's necessary. If you can come up with a couple, that'd be great. Each state will be asked to prioritize those. What are some potentials? Maybe it's how many in-house versus outsourced repairs you're doing. Maybe it's how much rework are you doing. Maybe it's a measure of what your condition of your fleet is. Average repair turnaround time. These are just ideas that I put down as potentials just to kind of get the ball rolling here. Your average age in certain categories of your fleet, what's the average age of your dump trucks, or what's the average age? There's plenty others that you can think of. And honestly, maybe the list is 5 and we ought to stop at that. That's also an answer. So you guys talk about it as a region. At the end of the day, we'll report out and we'll do some voting. So with that, I'd like to sit down.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.